Hello, I'm Fanny Hauser and I'm here with my colleague Victor Neumann. Together we have received the curatorial fellowship of the Gebert Foundation of Culture in the Swiss city of Rapperswil. In this context, we had the great opportunity to co-curate 4 exhibitions, one of them being the exhibition Tomorrow's Language. Due to the current pandemic, unfortunately, Tomorrow's Language could not take shape or could not be realized as an actual exhibition, which is why we decided to produce this very video. The video will give you an introduction not only to the main ideas of the exhibition Tomorrow's Language, but will also introduce you to the practice of the 3 artists invited, whom you will also see and hear in this video. Tomorrow's Language is an exhibition that has now almost been 2 years in the making. We invited Philipp Gufler, Rory Pilgrim, and Louwrien Wijers to participate in this exhibition. Tomorrow's Language is about finding new forms and grammars for alliances, kinships, and solidarity. Above all, however, Tomorrow's Language is also about the friendship of the 3 artists and their common desire to share stories.
The upcoming contribution by Louwrien Wijers will give an insight into her practice around the 5-day symposium Art Meets Science and Spirituality in Changing Economy that has happened in Amsterdam's Stedelijk Museum in 1919 and was organized by her over many years beforehand. This conference has inspired Louwrien Wijers over and over again to investigate its material as she is writing to better understand what was being said in 1990. Time and time again, the material has served as inspiration not just to Wijers, but to many others. In 2017, Louwrien has organized a 5-day retreat where a group of 20 people has gathered to watch and discuss the symposium. Out of this everyday ritual, the group has been distilling what they felt was most important for tomorrow. When Louwrien was telling us about this retreat in Friesland during the first time we were meeting, we all immediately loved its title, and Louwrien was so kind to offer us to use it for our exhibition, Tomorrow's Language.
Art Meets Science and Spirituality in a Changing Economy was 5 days in the Stedelijk Museum, and every day was another panel with an artist, a scientist, a spiritual leader, and an economist. In the first panel was Robert Rauschenberg. I met him when I came to New York for the first time in January 1986, and really in his studio I felt what art is about, and it has kept me going until today. What we are talking about is art meets science and spirituality in a changing economy, something I realized in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam in 1990 after being inspired by Beuys, Philipp, Andy Warhol and different other people. So it is a thing that happened more than 30 years ago. Around the Dalai Lama were scientists developing the new concepts of science, confronting the Dalai Lama with questions they could not get solved by traditional scientific thinking, the linear way of thinking. In Austria in 1983, the Dalai Lama took part in Other Realities, a meeting of spiritual leaders and scientists. David Bohm, Francisco Varela, Rupert Sheldrake, Fritjof Capra. We were sharing a dinner. I was sitting there. I was talking about art, and Fritjof Capra said, "We don't know these people." I said, "Let's make art meet science and spirituality." Then Capra said, "But if you're not going to invite Ilya Prigozhin, then we are not coming." So Prigozhin is very important in the most important new scientist, and Beuys and Philipp were very excited. David Bohm, born in the United States, sent out of the country because he was a communist, then finally ends in London. And he became a friend of the Dalai Lama. So when the Dalai Lama came in Amsterdam, he first went to say hello to David Bohm, and then he asked, what is my room number? The real meaning of compassion is to feel together. If people have the same feeling together and are responsible for each other, then you have compassion. John Cage, we know him from music, or even music without sound. But in fact, John Cage was an artist too. He was also making works for walls. And I think he was the most important person for the second half of the 20th century. Very inspiring, very broad-minded, a Buddhist. He said, art gives that experience of general uncertainty. Artists are busy as birds. They never have enough time. They work night and day and are completely involved in their work. They require no vacations. I think essentially people are this way. They know perfectly well what to do with their time if they are left anarchic. This is what we must move to. We want flexibility, and we also want an anarchic situation in which people do what they want to do, not what they are obliged to do. You breathe better when you are anarchic than you do when governed by a government. Prigozhin, also from Russian descent, he fled Russia when he was young with his parents, studied in Germany, came to Brussels finally, and he is the scientist that these scientists who I met in Graz told me, if Prigozhin is not there, we are not coming. He's a beautiful and great person, a great mind, and he made the chaos theory the new way of looking at science in the chaotic way, never knowing what is actually happening. Non-linear science. Non-linear science permits us to develop an economy which is no longer based on the exploitation of man by man. It permits creativity and leads to self-organization. The change is absolute radical. Day 3, Wednesday, the third panel, finally a Dutch person, J.C.J. van der Heijden. He is an artist who makes work that is two-dimensional. You remember that going from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions, actually 2 dimensions show a multi-dimension. And Jacques van der Heijden is famous for art is doing, it's not thinking. Doing comes first. The special thing is that you are not making something. Everything comes together in one point. I think we all know that art is from another consciousness than the day-to-day consciousness. Francisco Varela, a scientist from Chile who studied in the United States for a long time and also was a Buddhist, and we met him in Graz when the Dalai Lama was meeting the non-linear scientists. So Francisco sat there at the table and he was very enthusiastic. about art meets science and spirituality in a changing economy. Perception precisely is that drawing out into the visible something that wasn't there as visible previously. So he says what artists do is exactly bringing out that which is invisible, and they bring it to our eyes. He has a great esteem for artists. Francisco Varela had mentioned Tessa Bilecki, Mother Tessa Bilecki, a nun, active, and in a modern way, because she made monasteries where men and women lived together. So Tessa Bilecki was spirituality in the third panel, and I was reflecting on the most skillful means to describe love in the context of this meeting. I would like to describe love as becoming the beloved, knowing what it feels like to be the other. That is Tessa. Mr. Pinheiro Neto comes from Brazil, and he was a gift from the sponsors also. He actually is a good friend of Prince Charles, and he's a very laugh and happy person. It was wonderful to have him on panel 3. It's not enough to give hope to people who suffer from hunger. How should we go about raising the standard of living of the destitute? This symposium has dealt, to my surprise and pleasure, with the responsibility towards the less fortunate. Florence Wiener. I met Florence Wiener in March, April 1969 in Amsterdam. He was in an exhibition in the Stedelijk, and we became friends and are still friends. Lawrence is, they say, he makes words on papers or on walls, so he's not a painter, but a word person. I made the suggestion that if we could deal with these questions of hunger and poverty, not in the political ways, but in a very simple way of give and take, you'd have to find something that you wanted, and it can't be the European model of going on holiday and turning people into servants. And that's how you help their economy. That doesn't help anybody. I'm appalled that we are still talking about structures that don't work. Jean-Maxime Lévesque, director of the Crédit Lyonnais Bank in Paris, in France. He is from France, and he wants us to be more going for one world. We all depend on others all around the world. Because of globalization, everybody has the opportunity to meet others and know what they think. The overall prosperity brings frightening disruptions: overpopulation, injustice, poverty, exhaustion of natural resources, lack of spirituality, deterioration of the environment. It is the energy of everyone which brings development. The only solution is to find ways to create a global humanity. Marina Abramovic is from Yugoslavia. She came to Amsterdam to do something, to do a performance with the Appel, And so I met her then in 75, and we have been friends ever since. She says we are completely disconnected from the flow of nature. When I was staying with the Aborigines in Australia, and then she tells that the 50,000 years of society that exists for the Aboriginals is still functioning. So when an Aborigine is born, immediately everyone knows for what he is responsible, for which rock, for which plants, and his social function. He is connected with the flow of nature, and he has complete benefit from it. So she shows us that we have lost a lot, and we have people still who have it. So in the fifth panel comes Fridtjof Capra for science. He's the one who said in Graz, I don't know the artist, and then I said, okay, let's make art meet science and spirituality. So here is Fridtjof, born in Austria, and most of his time spent in the United States. And he says, give more power to the people locally. Democracy needs small scale. America is not a democratic country. The scale is too large. You buy votes through television, and that is not democratic. People should choose their own pattern of development. So that, I think, is very important to change the politics. Raymond Panikkar, Indian family, left India, and he's born in Spain and stayed there. He's not only a scientist, he's not only a spiritual person for Christianity as well as Hinduism as well as Buddhism, but he is also a scientist. A person on the board of Art Meets Science and Spirituality came up with Raymond Panikkar and showed me the big books that Panikkar has written, and that's how I invited him for panel 5. And would you agree, Raymond Panikkar says, that art is not the monopoly of artists? We have put art in a secondary role, but art is more essential than science. Man can live without science, but we cannot live without art. Art means to bring your life with your body and your surrounding on a human scale. Competitive society is a natural outcome of the loss of the artistic dimension. Creativity is so flowing, we cannot manipulate it. It is in everybody. The original Tomorrow's Language, which happened in 2019, 5 days in retreat. We woke up early in the morning and we worked till late in the evening, watching the films, writing down what we wanted. So those sentences that I have just said come from different people who have helped watching the film, everything that had been said in 1990. I'll give you the names. Maria Jill Uldemolens, Kadin Navarro, Yungshen Zhu, Vika Ushkanova, Constance Schreiber, Marike Ploeg, Elisabeth Zweetman, Jason Hendrik Hansma, Masha Roe, Katelijne Smulders, Andrea Karg, Titus Nouwens, Philipp Gufler, Laurie Kluitmans, Guido Enthoven, Pieter Schmitz, Volker Jansen, Alain Longino. And we have to thank them for their thinking and choosing these sentences.
We are very excited about the contribution by Rory Pilgrim, who not only agreed to give a short introduction to his video work, The Undercurrent, which we were supposed to present in the context of the exhibition, but also agreed to play some songs for us.
Hello, my name's Rory Pilgrim, and I'm recording this from Friesland in the Netherlands. I'm gonna play two songs for you that would have been in films in tomorrow's language. The first song is from a film I made called The Undercurrent, which was made in 2019 in Boise, Idaho. And for that film, I worked with 10 youth climate activists in which we try to find language and words and ways to talk about how the climate crisis manifests in our own lives and how we acquaint it to very personal things from relationships, friendships, experiences of work, activism. And through the film is a soundtrack I also wrote with 4 songs. For me, music is perhaps the most intuitive language in which I turn to be able to comprehend things. And the song I'm going to play is a song called The Towel. I first started writing it actually in a session in Berlin with my co-collaborator and songwriter Robin Haddon. And we were trying to tease out words or phrases, and this word or this phrase came about the towel. And normally you say you throw in the towel as in to give up. And of course with the climate crisis, we cannot do that. So we bring the towel instead. I then took the song to Boise, Idaho and worked with it with a fantastic singer called Declan Rowe John, who was 13 at the time. I'm going to be playing the song myself on the harp and singing is something which I very rarely do in public. And I'll talk a little bit about my relationship with my voice in the next song. But for now, here's The Towel.
There's a hole in your heart. There's a hole in this instance, baby. There's a hole in our heart. There's a hole in this instance, baby. Baby. It's so close you can feel it. Catch fire when you breathe it. No way to escape it. Hardcore disbelief it. So tend to it fast and stop it from bleeding. A hole in your heart, but we can't even feel it. But it hurts. It hurts. when it falls really fast. Bring your car and catch me, baby. There's a hole in our hearts. Drive away and go to the water. Drive your car really fast. Drive away now. Drive your car really fast. Drive away. Drive away, drive away. So tender it fast and stop it from bleeding. A hole in your heart, but we can't even feel it. But it hurts. It hurts. Backwards, forwards, greenwards. Backwards, forwards, greenwards. Bring a towel to the water. Bring a towel and keep it dry. Bring a towel to the water. Bring a towel, just keep it dry.
This next song I'm going to play is from the film Lana Keisler by Philipp Gufler, which would have been in the exhibition Tomorrow's Language. Philip asked me to write the soundtrack, and in order to do so, I looked at the material that Philip was working with, and I was just astounded by encountering this queer person who was performing on mainstream television at the same time that I myself was a teenager. And the word that came most to mind was just this feeling of how utterly brave this person was. So the song is called Brave, and in the film I actually, it's a rare moment where I am singing publicly. I think my own relationship with my singing voice is something of a kind of queerness, where it's not that I have shame of it, but it's definitely a queer voice. But this is Brave, written by Lana Keisler.
How to be brave on your own. How to keep safe on your own. When you're alone, so alone. Show them, and in our world, for the exterior is a pathway to lead home.
With Philipp Gufler, we had the pleasure to record a conversation which not just gives an insight into the many works he would have exhibited during the exhibition, but will also premiere excerpts of his work Lana Kaiser, a video that was originally supposed to premiere during our exhibition. Hi, Philipp. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with Fanny and me about Tomorrow's Language, an exhibition that we have planned to open last year, already in April. Then it got postponed to this year in March, and unfortunately now it got cancelled due to the restrictions around Corona. Tomorrow's Language was originally planned to be a group exhibition with you, Rory Pilgrim and Louwrien Wijers, around new forms and grammars for alliances, kinship and solidarity, also with those who are no longer with us or not yet with us. I think ultimately it was conceived by Fanny and me as an exhibition about friendship and also time-defying bonds that open up alternative futurities.
Your center of the exhibition was from the beginning on about friendship. And so when you asked Rory and me about whom we can think about, we both had immediately to our mind as well, Louwrien Wijers in mind, because like also our work was kind of like loosely connected to her practices and the friendships we both shared with Louwrien. And so I really like this, as a structure, because I don't know, like the relationships between artists and like the informal kind of like influences and shared interests we share with each other are very often like very much invisible. And it's so much focused on like the single artist and his studio work, where I think in real life it's actually much more about like how we influence each other and how we appear also in each other's works. So for example, like with Louwrien, I have actually quite a long history already with working with her together. Like we met through my interest on the performance artist Bende Armagnac, and she published a really great book about Ben's works, and was they were also in a relationship for many years till he died in 1978. So it was very natural for me that I wanted to meet her, and like it started with Bende Armagnac as our mutual friend, I would say, but then developed, and then through her I also got to know Rory, and now he's appearing also in my new video work. So I really love this, these influences and how we appear in each other's works. And I think it's vice versa, like how I'm appearing as well in Evelyn's work, and how we can support each other. And that's why I was also so much into the exhibition from the beginning on.
Yeah, I think one aspect of the exhibition, it's I completely agree with what you're saying, and it's really something that is really visible. I believe in all contributions of all the three of you, you, Rory, and Louwrien, because not only do you appear in each other's work, but also you bring, let's say, external people or like additional people on board. I mean, you, of course, with your series of quilts that you dedicate to different historical people or sites or magazines, but also, for instance, with your installation, I Want to Give You Devotion, which we decided that we're going to show at the exhibition, which now unfortunately is not the case anymore. But it's an installation that consists of historical posters from the Forum Queeres Archiv München, and a queer archive you've been working with for many years already. And it's an installation that combines these historical posters, but that is also kind of updated in a way by a newly produced posters that by invited artists.
So each time when I'm showing the installation, I Want to Give You Devotion, it's very much like about the historic posters, of course, but what is also missing in the history, what is missing in the collection of the Forum Queeres Archiv München, and how can we extend it? Like, where are the blind spots? Where are political issues as well? which were not so much focused. So, for example, like transvisibility or an intersectional perspective is something, of course, like the whole queer community can still very much work on. And this is, of course, like also my perspective as an artist nowadays, to also like learn from the past, but also like produce a future where these things can be useful again. And so each time I'm looking on the blind spots, actually, and then the historic posters will be shown together with new commissioned works by the artist. Because when people think about history and archives, they think about like this closed, fixed identity. But when I started to work there, it's a self-organized archive. I experienced actually how fragile these archives is, how important oral history is, and how we still have to learn to find new stories or new ways of telling our past and care about the people from the past as well. So the posters were supposed to be installed on 6 fabric banners. Each banner has like a specific subject or theme. And then like inside, and the 6 fabric banners with the posters on generated like some kind of space. And inside of the I Want to Give You Devotion installation, it was supposed to, the Lana Kaiser video was supposed to be exhibited, which was like a new work. You kind of like were a big part of the development of this new work.
I remember quite vividly when you were starting to speak about producing a work around Lana Kaiser, that for me, this was like a rather obscure reference from my early youth days, knowing her from the first Idol franchise of Germany. And through talking to you and actually also seeing the footage or the way you have been dealing with the footage, I quite frankly have only realized the construction of this obscurity, because it was so long ago also that I've been thinking about it. I think it was, of course, also hearing your personal connection to her was giving us a different entrance. I immediately think of the connections to the quilts, that of course these are mostly queer elders, but in this case it's someone who was your age or almost your age, but still I think as much as the queer elders, she paved the way also for you.
It's also something that becomes very visible in both the quilts as much as the video work, actually, since these are also since in both of these works you also inscribe yourself, and you are also part. I mean, on the quilts there are photos of you as a teenager with Lana Kaiser, and as well in the video work you appear, and you kind of reinscribed your body also into this narration, which I think works very beautifully. Given your personal history with Lana Kaiser, but also I think it fit very well for us, and this is something that really grew very organically, of course, but to the overall concept of the exhibition as well, right? Where friendship, for instance, is really one of the central themes.
I was doubting in the beginning, honestly, like very much to make a work about her, even like, yeah, she was important for me when I grew up very much. And also looking back, I experienced, how queer people were treated in reality. We, not only in Germany, of course, like her case is of course not like a singular case. And and I think I always felt like a difficulty to identify as male or like within the gender category, and like seeing her on TV refusing to have like in this time to be identified not as gay and not as straight, not to be identified as a woman nor as a man, to really refuse these categories. I found her quite revolutionary, and I find her also very strong. And I think like this is what I wanted to show in the video work as well. Like I wanted to show with how aggressive the audience and media reacted on her refusal to identify in her identity, her sexual identity and her gender identity. But also like how she still had the strength to stick on it. Actually till she disappeared in 2018. So the first thing was really like the quilt I made. Looking back on the photographs, I think that the video is really like how I want to remember her, because there was also frustration how the media capitalized also her disappearance in 2018 again. And I found this so wrong, like the refusal of the media to even consider to call her by a self-named name, self-chosen name, Lana Kaiser, has of course also very much economic reasons to sell the magazines and to create a story. And it's actually continuing till now. And this is not how I wanted to remember her. I really I wanted to find a way to remember her in a very sensitive way and show her fragility, but also her strength.
To be brave on your own. How to keep safe on your own. When you're alone, so alone.
I remember that Fanny and me were speaking also quite early on about the fact that while you are, of course, acknowledging the systemic violence which was kind of subjugated towards her, you also very much refuse to be part of this narration of victimization of hers, and rather really try to celebrate the gestures of queer dissidents which have been part of her stage presence since such an early age. And speaking about this kind of queer dissidence, I would love to, of course, speak with you also about another figure who we wanted to present in one of the quilts, which is Lorenza Böttner.
Yeah, Lorenza's work is of course also very special to me, and I was very happy to dedicate a quilt to her. But the conversations with her mother, Irene, were really important for me as well, to kind of like, I think like the research for my quilts is also very intimate as well. Like it's not so much only like, it's not about like putting them into a canon, a queer canon, which I want to create through my series of quilts. It's very much more about like my own desire as well, and my own fragility and my own, about like things not only like I want to celebrate more people. I find also really productive to think about like a different queer future. And I think like Lorenza's work is very similar to Lana Kaiser, refusing to identify, also actually like both spending a big part of their life in Bavaria.
I mean, for this exhibition, we commissioned quite a few quilts. I mean, there was the quilt, as you mentioned, dedicated to Lorenza Böttner, which is on the one hand also kind of based on this talk, or kind of evolved out of this conversation that you and Victor had in the context of the Forum in Munich 1.5 years ago. A quilt dedicated to Lana Kaiser, but then also 2 other quilts that also reflected a bit on the Swiss context, actually, of the exhibition.
When you told me about the exhibition in Switzerland, and if I'm I want to research there also something specific. Like the first thing I had in mind to really finally, since a couple of years, I know about the work of Elisa von Kupfer, who called himself in the later years Elisarion, like the religion he also founded. And he made like this painting, this round painting, I think 30 meters long, 26 meters, I wrote it down, and 3 meters high, which he built like a small temple, which is still like at the Lago Maggiore in Minusio. Yeah. I also used some quotes for the quilt, as writing was also a big part of his practice. It's really like also, it's not so much like the quilts about like making a simple portrait of them, finding like a historic motive of them and printing it. It's really like also about, yeah, getting closer to them as artists. May it be like Lorenza, Lana Kaiser, or Der Kreis, also a fourth one. Der Kreis was actually published from 1943 to 1967. So it's almost like a vehicle between like the first gay movement and like the second gay movement, which was then in Germany possible again after the decriminalization of same-sex relationships under the paragraph 175 in 1969. So I found this magazine is specifically interesting because like it's also showing, like it's the only magazine which was like published during the Second World War in the world. The first quilts were connected directly to my research about like the beginning of the AIDS crisis in Germany. The AIDS Memorial quilt was a very big reference in that, because like a public memory and a public artistic memory about the people which were lost and the places also which were lost through the AIDS pandemic. There was not such a ritual in Germany, but the technique of quilting is of course so much older. It's about like really like about like the textiles, using the textiles of the people or places we lost and creating something new out of the textiles. And so like the textile quality is really like so much more important than actually what is on the quilt almost. Like it's really like about the haptic as well so much. And then about the transparency of the different fabrics of sheets and how they are like almost like different layers, which are sometimes also in a very contraposition or something. And I think like this textile quality is very, very important for me.
The exterior, inferior of love, of our home. From the village to the streets, to the cities, freed relief of our own. For young, impressionable hearts, we found a way